I'd like to welcome everyone today to our webinar entitled Where Channel Revenue Growth Really Comes From, Alliance Architecture and Design plus 4 Profitable Heresies. My name is Seth Jacobson. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at LogicBay. For those of you that may not know, we are a provider of partner relationship management software. And that means that we spend most of our days working with our clients and prospects to help them improve the support of their channel sales partners. So needless to say, we know that this is a challenge in more ways than one, which is why we have built our own network of channel partners to help provide the expertise in a lot of the areas of channel strategy, channel development, and best practices for a successful channel sales execution. Today, I'm very pleased to bring 2 of those experts to our webinar, and they will provide some provocative thoughts on what they see as viable strategies and best practices in these areas. First, we have Marty Tascona of Deliberate Selling. Marty specializes in sales enablement and effective market positioning, and today he'll be talking specifically about alliance architecture and design, both of which are key to establishing and sustaining successful channel sales. And we are also joined by Michael A. Brown of B2B Engage. Michael has spent his career helping B2B companies improve the effectiveness of their sales and marketing efforts, and today he'll be focusing on 4 profitable heresies, which are workable sales strategies and tactics that counter some of the really bad sales guidance showing up online and on business publication nowadays. Before I do turn it over to Marty, a few important notes. First, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sure to provide access to that recording shortly after the session is complete. Second, in the interest of keeping this as interactive as possible, we do have a chat functionality that's located at the right. I'll be doing my best as the moderator today here to monitor that chat, so if anyone has any questions they would like to pose to either Marty or Michael, please use that space to do so. We also have some areas for feedback as we make our way through the content, and you can use that chat session to participate in that manner. Last but not least, at the end of today's session, we'll be providing access to a couple exciting free resources that will help you evaluate some of the concepts that are being discussed today, and you'll see how those impact your own organization. I think that covers it from my end, so I appreciate everybody for taking the time to join us today, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marty.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Seth. And first of all, again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking some time out of your busy day to engage with us. My name is Marty Tascona, and I am the president of Deliberate Selling. I'll be with you for about the next 20 minutes or so, possibly a bit less. And so, again, what we're going to try to cover is the why of channels, the why of strategic alliances, and a number of the considerations that must go into how you approach the market and how you approach your allies, and considerations that go into the selection process, and how you're going to align yourself to try to drive success. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So like a lot of stories, they kind of start out with once upon a time, and this is a story that goes back into the 90s, back before there was even a term called the an internet startup, which in fact we were. And as I say in the slide, believe it or not, internet email was not always pervasive, reliable, or dial tone quality. So the startup story is essentially, we were a single product company with a single sales channel. We were selling direct. We had a diffuse approach. We were looking for anybody with a network or campus-style network as a possible target, so not very focused. And we really had no clear value proposition. We were selling out of Edmonton, Edmonton, Alberta, or Northern Alberta in Canada, but principally our customers were in the States. We had some in the UK. Again, in higher education principally, but we also sold smatterings here and there around the world. At the beginning, of course, like most startups, you approach it with a great amount of enthusiasm. You know you've got a technology lead over the marketplace, and off you go. So the way I've sequenced this slide is we start at, that's part of the startup story, but in essence, then things turned red. And how they turned red is, again, we had a single channel, which was direct sales. So if we go to the next slide, this will help set the stage as to about channels. So the way we started, direct sales, we had a small sales force, relatively inexpensive and very expensive in relation to initial revenues. and the amount of invested capital that we had to work with. Over time, of course, we found that penetration was slower than we thought and had planned, as many startups find. And we were not able to get into many of the markets the way that we needed to. And so that led to, at certain points, it led to some downsizing. It led to a range of challenges because we just weren't getting the traction that we could have had or needed to have in order to stay on track. So go to the next slide. And so what we ended up is going from direct sales to a handful of different approaches. And so there was a reason for that. Now, it would be simple to say, well, we wanted to make more money. Well, it's true. Growth was definitely an issue for us. But along the way, what we ended up having, we got a new CEO in 1998, and this fella he showed up, he had a plan, he had a strategy, and that very much included channels. So when we deal with the issue of motivation, there were numerous. One, he said, "Thou shalt," or "make it so," the way you would actually expect, not Kirk, but one of the commanders on Star Trek to make. So with that, we set out to go out and try to build a channel, and that ended up being my role. I had previously been a sales guy, then I was the VP of sales, and then once he came on board, and we set out with this program, we ended up going down the path of strategic marketing, which meant alliances through and channel partnerships of whatever flavor made sense. We had no experience at it. We had no particular skill. It wasn't even part of our lexicon or the mindset. So that meant we had to develop something. If we go to the next slide, please. And so when you go to market with a channel strategy, or more a multi-channel strategy, essentially, then it means that you have to ask a number of questions. And so whereas in the beginning we thought great technology that simply answered the question as to what value, you have to ask questions about, well, what value are you bringing to the customer? We also had to learn to ask what value did we build or bring or could help create for our partner, something we had never thought of before. Initially, we looked at it as at a very tactical or transactional level, whereby if you sold our stuff, well, you get to keep 20% or 25%, and boy, you should be happy with that. Well, sounded pretty good to us, did not sound very good to them, and our early efforts at diving into the channel weren't very effective. So we had to start asking ourselves this question: what value could we create that would be of strategic value to our partner? We had to take a look at the offers we were making. Initially, we were selling a piece of client software, then we had server software, we had a range of directory software, we had all kinds of stuff bundled together to create a whole solution, but not everybody wanted all of that. Nonetheless, in the process of trying to go to market, we had to figure out what would fit, what would drive value, what offer, what subset of our technology would make sense for the people or the companies that we would try to do business with. Which also then meant that we had to understand their customers. So it's one thing to understand what your partner wants and what your historical customers have gained value from, but now you have to transition to understanding what your partner's customer is looking for in a solution, and adopt yourself to that. And then again, looking at the channel tactically, we were thinking only resellers. We'll put it into a VAR channel or give it to a reseller, and life is grand. Okay, it's a naive assumption. It was the one that we initially had made at the very beginning, when we had many opportunities to do better. But later on, back in '98 and then into '99, with the new CEO and a new mandate, we took a much deeper approach and a much stronger approach. And so, although I didn't know it at the time, I didn't have a term for it, I've now aggregated these four things into a methodology that I simply call value segmentation, where ultimately all of these things combine to drive value for the target that you're trying to drive value for. So let's go to the next slide then. So because we'd had no experience, I started rooting around and looking for some maps, for some guidance, for some better information as to how we could approach this problem of building a map where we could apply the segmentation to. And essentially, I derived this image that you're looking at here from a fellow named Robert Porter Lynch, and he had created some very good text and some graphics around that. And essentially, it forces you to look at the market and the structure of the market in a very different way. It's extremely important. So rather than at a simple tactical reseller, we're the manufacturer, producer, reseller model, or producer distributor model, as you see on the right-hand side, we started to look at it a little bit differently, and started to look deeper into, well, who knows stuff, who has technology and know-how, and maybe we can work with towards a better product or an offering, but certainly they know certain things about markets that we could compete in, or that we could begin to architect messages or architect offerings or relationships that would help us do better. When we speak to the topic, again, of motivation, one of the key ones that you'll see on the left-hand side of this diagram is division of risk. When you try to enter foreign markets that have very different regulatory compliance or regulatory requirements, or that, of course, speak a very different language, have a different business culture, to enter into that directly is going to be extremely difficult. A former colleague of mine, not at this company, but in a different place, he's a Caucasian fellow that speaks fluent Japanese and many forms, business, formal, informal, as you'd want. And this fellow specialized in helping companies enter into the Japanese market, going there from the US and from Canada, because he understood his way around, could talk the language, knew the customs. So to pay him what would seem like a lot of money at the time was actually a lot less than the risk that one would experience in trying to go enter the Japanese market without a Sherpa or without a guide. But nonetheless, this alliance architecture process is a way then to map out the various components, looking at sales and marketing, very important, but of course also looking at who's got product, who is selling at a peer level to you, who is selling to similar customers as you, and then ask yourself the question, can you make collaborative marketing agreements? Can you make co-selling agreements? Can you make a broad range of agreements that is going to help you penetrate a market in speed? And ultimately, as anybody here or in our audience, if they're in the software business or in the high-tech space, then the need for speed is excessive. It's much higher today than it ever was. But it essentially then says, if you're going to balance your budget, so to speak, in relation to risk, in relation to the competitive environment, you need to get access to markets much faster than you used to, because the life cycle or the timeline for the value of your technology is it's much more finite than it ever was. So there's a range of relationships that come out of a map like this that allow you to move faster, move with greater certainty, and begin to identify targets in the various markets that you want to go after. When I say targets, target allies or targeted channel partners to help you get from point A to point B. Next slide, please. Next slide. I seem frozen. Thank you. So when you go out to make partnerships or to create alliances, there's a range of things that have to go right. Certainly, you can map out the structure of the markets, how that's going to play. You can map out various components that you want to attend to, and that's great. That's super when it comes to the what's happening on paper and from a planning standpoint. But ultimately, you need to develop the relationship. And these are 8 components that are essential in any relationship if it's going to work. Generally speaking, you have to be headed in the same direction, and chemistry, how you feel about things matters. Operational integration is extremely important, and that's one of the great advantages of a system such as LogicBay is that they do offer that integration, which can really matter. But if you just think of trying to connect your offerings and your business model to somebody that's still working on an old IBM mainframe style of technology, it can be very difficult, and it may in fact get in the way of things. So if we move forward through that, then let's go to the next slide. So one of the things is that you have to be pursuing a win-win, and want to avoid people that say, well, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine too. And if you've ever had that happen, then the question becomes, well, how did that work out for you? Now, as part of that, one of the experiences that we had is we were pursuing a distribution deal with a company out of Southern California. They had an NT platform, which we did not. We thought this would be a great boon. We would try to cross-license each other's software and go from there. But it turns out, well, what they didn't want anything from us other than our customer list and our funnel. And they were, in fact, paying our at the time, VP of sales to try to get their hands on it. And we were rather slow in turning it around. And then this came out. He got canned, and needless to say that the relationship did not work out. So while it was great on paper, the words were good, sounded great. The music and the words did not match up. And we dodged a bullet by not doing any business with them. Next slide, please. Another way to go about targeting is to take a good look at what are channel competencies, and you can do it by the numbers, but every one of these things on this list, you can take a look at. Some will be more relevant, some will be less relevant, but by using a 5-point scale where you need more of or less of, or it's of high importance or low importance, you can create another way to again, build a matrix by which you can score and compare potential partners in a similar or same market. And there are other components that might go with this. You can create similar grids to do with product and similar grids to do specifically with the customer that it's more complex than we can cover in today's session. But again, the idea is to create a coherent, consistent method for scoring different channel partners in a market so that you can make selections that are going to make sense. Next slide, please. Next slide. I can't advance the slide. There we go. So there's another method as well that is kind of a hybrid of the 8 factors that we'd looked at earlier, as well as a more of a by the book or by the numbers matrix style. But this is an approach that just says start this whole process by taking a look at your top 5 best customers. Now I have 7, they're not evident here, but there's are 7 basic criteria blocks, sets of questions that you would apply to who are your 5 best customers. So you're real clear as to what they look like. Ask yourself, who are your best 5 partners, as you can see here, and then apply the same criteria and build up that profile. And then you can extend this forward into truly understanding what are your best partners, best customers. And as you understand that, you can make far more granular decisions and assessments as to what what an ideal or an optimal channel is going to look like. Who will work best with your customers, with you and your target customers, and allow you to drive the most value for them and, of course, for your organization. Next slide, please. And when we look at your best partners, customers, the real question then becomes why, or what is it about them that makes them the best for your partners? If you understand that, then you understand much more than you used to.
Marty, I'd like to say, I think that raises an excellent point. If anyone has any comments or thoughts on that subject, please feel free to enter those into the chat column at the right. while those comments are coming in, I would say that it really actually brings to mind something that we hear a lot about as it relates to understanding who those partners' best customers are, and really brings to light the importance of soliciting partner feedback to really understand some of those dynamics. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Well, I would say that's absolutely right, because if you don't understand that, you may put in place policies, or you are probably going to be missing product development information that's essential, or market level information, both from a feature and competitive positioning, because your partner's best customers are getting solicited by your competitors or your partner's competitors all the time. So anything that helps close the feedback loop is going to allow you to make stronger, more competitive offerings at all times.
Yeah, it looks like Caitlin sort of echoed that same sentiment, saying it's hard to know who their best customers are. Thanks, Caitlin.
Okay, so that's the end of that slide. And I'm sorry, are you fielding more questions? One from Daryl. New potential resist sharing. Many do at the beginning, but Daryl, but this is also part of the process of setting the expectations, and also in terms of both the agreement and the relationship. Some folks are concerned that you'll steal their customers, but in fact, if the tone is set correctly, and it may be part of the contractual arrangement that you're never going to compete, but it's always about trust, and which must be earned, but also which must be maintained through good hygiene. But your question as to why, basically why it's a trust issue. And everybody's been burned by a potential partner, or almost been burned at one time or another. And so, again, the trust burden is upon you, the supplier, to create the conditions whereby trust is possible, and earn the right to get access at the level that you're looking for. Ideally, it's done through a negotiated agreement as opposed to doing it contractually, which can often create tremendous resistance. And that's kind of the end of my portion of today's session. The main thing is that the investment in channels are not just an operating expense. They really do extend the value of your organization, which can be realized at exit time, and will certainly be realized through a broad range of other KPIs. And that's kind of it for me for today. So,
Marty, thank you very much for sharing that story with us. I think it really brings to light some of the best practices that you discussed, and really does emphasize the importance of a lot of the proper planning that needs to take place at the outset. So with all of that having been said, I'm going to turn over to Michael A. Brown now to discuss some of the ways that companies, once they have taken those initial steps, scales, and marketing approach in today's pretty complicated marketplace. Michael, over to you.
Well, thank you, Seth and Marty. Hi, everybody. Good to be with you from Austin, Texas. Michael A. Brown is my name, and I'm presenting about 4 profitable heresies. Now, these are not heresies as in off-the-wall bizarre stuff. Rather, they're more a return to the things that we all know and have practiced successfully for a great many years, but frankly have become a bit muddled in recent times because of some genuinely bad guidance, some bad advice showing up online and in publications. So I call them 4 profitable heresies. You see the headlines on the screen in front of you, and I'll ask that we please advance to the next visual, and I'll take you through them one by one. The first heresy is to identify and develop sales opportunities, not merely marketing leads. In my work with various manufacturers and with channel partners, I hear lots of conversations about leads, and I try to find out, what do you mean by a lead? You don't simply mean I trust a name on a business card or on a contact list. You mean a viable opportunity, a genuine account that has the likelihood of turning into a realistic and profitable customer. So the first piece of this is to work between the manufacturer and the channel partners on a single definition of a viable opportunity. It may not be identical for each of those entities, but we need to know what it means in each of those entities. It follows then, this is the second point on your screen, that marketing and sales, both within the manufacturing community and the channel community, need to establish and implement a uniform lead criteria and scoring system. Frankly, if you're looking for alignment between marketing and sales, anything other than a marketing qualified lead, that's what you see here, MQL, has to equal, by definition, a sales accepted lead. Absent that kind of continuity, there is a mismatch. And you'll hear people say things like, those hot leads weren't. You'll hear salespeople say, what do you mean those leads were qualified? And the marketers will say, of course they were, because we did our diligence. Those two things have to be equal. A definitive release point. At which point does this opportunity pass from the marketing functions into sales functions? And there may be various versions of that. Who's marketing, who's sales, within the channel or within the manufacturing itself. But that definitive release point helps everybody know when that viable opportunity actually requires and deserves sales attention. And of course, we clarify which entity does what, under what circumstances. And of course, you need opportunity distribution rules, so there's no ambiguity about who gets what. I will suggest also, and you see this in the last of the bullet points, that you build in some flexibility into the opportunity development process so that when you need sales attention, sales can attend to the opportunity rather than simply waiting until the opportunity goes by. A good example of this is in the case of a request for proposal. Those of you who have been around for a while know that the person and the entity that helps to prepare the RFP is usually the winner of the RFP. Next visual, please. I urge you, please avoid some of the marketing and sales fads and follies that are going around. You've probably seen stuff online about how algorithms now drive all sorts of customer contact, all sorts of prospect engagement. Folks, even when it's based on a supposed trigger event, algorithms for sending another email, another brochure, or whatever, complement but don't replace dialogue. At some point, sooner rather than later, in my experience, we do need to talk to our customers, talk to our prospects. Likewise, automation ought not drive telephone calls and email as if those two things are mass marketing. Truly, they're not. Think of all of the email and all of the phone calls you've had in your business life. Most of the good ones have been between you and one other person. When we are the marketers and sellers, whether part of the sales channel or the manufacturer, we owe it to ourselves and our prospects and customers to behave the same. Social media marketing works best one-to-one. Social media as a billboard will fail more often than not. Regarding content, there's been a lot of poor advice recently in online forums advising everybody having anything whatsoever to do with marketing and sales ought to become a blogger, ought to be posting to LinkedIn every day. Nay, nay. Only good writers ought to be doing that. Organizations, both within the channel and the manufacturers, need to establish and enforce an editorial process so that what is seen and heard on the organization's behalf makes sense and generates business. Next visual, please. Second heresy. Do, by all means, enable collaboration, cooperation, and continuity between marketing and sales, but don't pretend that they're identical. Don't pretend that they do or ought to do the same kinds of things. You can read marketing's charter here. You can read sales's charter. My message to you, and I say this with great respect, get the assignments right. Some of you may have seen that diagram of the supposed marketing and sales funnel that's making its way around the internet these days, where on the right side, the nowadays side, if you will, marketing does almost everything and sales is sitting around waiting for money to drop in their laps. Folks, that may happen on some planets, but it certainly doesn't happen here on Earth. Get the assignments right. The next frame, please. And to paraphrase The Who, their great old song, let's not get fooled again. Some of the statistics, some of the guidance that flows from the statistics and the supposed reality that sometimes shows up online. Let me be a heretic here. Take some of those engagement stats with a big grain of salt. I don't know of any organization where the salespeople are allowed to sit around and wait until the purchase choice is 57% done before sales gets involved. Folks, that's a recipe for poverty. Let's not do that. Most of you have CRM systems. Most of you have other kinds of automation systems, but they're not magic. Hey, I got a question for you to keep this kind of interactive, going along with our notion of paraphrasing The Who, let's not get fooled again. I'm betting that you've heard some stuff that's passed off as marketing or sales wisdom that you consider a bunch of baloney. If you feel like it, go to the chat box and write down a few words about what you've heard or seen somewhere that you consider a bunch of baloney, and we can talk about that. Next visual, if you will, please. Third heresy, and this is a biggie. Distinctive sales development implies conversations, not merely the interchange with the spoken word of data capture and goodness knows not interrogations. As one of my clients likes to say, prospects and customers appreciate dialogue, but they detest depositions. And I can assure you that's the case. Your marketers and sellers have to be able to conduct genuine business conversations. And folks, this is huge. I respectfully urge you, don't assign freshmen and JV callers to contact your varsity prospects and customers. Conduct business at parity, both by market segment and by levels of contact. Now, please understand, by no means am I suggesting that young people can't sometimes communicate with great skill, but it's very difficult, almost impossible, to ask somebody who has never even visited a Fortune 500 organization to market and sell at parity to the people who run it. Next frame, please. Several different sequences. You have options nowadays thanks to the wonderful communications technologies. I don't need to read these options to you because you can read the words visually faster than I can say them. Suffice to say that in your marketing efforts, your selling efforts, whether you represent a manufacturer or a channel partner or both, make the choice deliberately. Test, amend, and go with the option or options that work best for your unique business circumstances, your customer and prospect base, and your market niche. Next frame, please. Learn and practice qualification without intimidation. Marty spoke in the first part of the program today about qualifying whether or not the channel partners themselves are qualified. Now we're talking about qualifying the genuine opportunities that the manufacturers and or the channel partners are actually working. Again, conversations are better than interrogations. Leading questions are better than loaded questions. You see an example. Ask your questions, coach and counsel your callers to ask their questions, and then stop talking. Let the prospect or customer answer, and then listen. I mean, really listen. And what I mean here by attending to the audio, not the video, is that when you've got a headset on, like the gentleman in the photograph, he's working in radio, but what's he got right in front of him? A big TV, the video monitor. And the psychologists tell us that for sighted people, something like 80% of our daily information intake is visual. So there's a great temptation to let what's on that screen lead the dialogue rather than the other way around. So a tactical, practical tip, turn the video monitor 45 to 90 degrees away from the straight ahead line of sight while your callers are on the phone. They will have better conversations. And of course, ask elaboration questions because that's the interaction. It's not a forms completion exercise. It's not a, boy, we've got to fill out those 48 data fields in our CRM exercise. And now I have a question for you on the next visual, please. What do you do? How do you do it to get your sales development people ready to call and then improve their skills? I bet you're doing one or more of these. If you feel like it, down there in that chat box, let us know which ones you're doing. And can I give you a hint? Which one do you think is the best? You're absolutely right. Training and practice. The idea of throwing them on the phone to sink or swim always brings to mind to me somebody saying, oh, all the passengers and the cargo are on this airplane. Here's the manual, Mr. Novice Pilot, Ms. Novice Pilot. Go have a nice flight. Well, that's not fair to the pilot or the passengers of the cargo. And putting people on the phone without preparation to try to conduct good business is probably not going to happen. Next visual, if you will, please. The fourth and the last of the heresies: execute with due diligence, but without hesitation. This means do your planning and do your preparation, but please don't get caught in that trap of fixing to prepare to get ready to begin to commence to start. It's better to test, amend, and retest rather than to wait until everything is actually perfect, absolutely perfect. You can see the sequence that I recommend on your visual here, and of course you have access to this at any time because you can watch the show again if you wish. Next frame, if you will, please. Within those different options for acting diligently but with haste, make sure that you're applying the best selling model or models for your circumstances. Down the left column of this visual, you see 4 of the most common sales models, what they're okay for, what they're not okay for, and how to go about it. Consistent with my comments a moment ago about sales development, be really careful with trying to use the challenger approach too soon in the process. It's been my experience and that of a number of my clients. The truth be told, you have to earn the right to challenge. Use this chart, make some money. Thank you very, very much indeed. It's been a delight to have you with us this afternoon. Michael A. Brown is my name. I'll turn it now back over to Seth.
We do have a couple offers here, as I alluded to at the very beginning. The first being a 10-point checkup for lead generation and qualification. The second being a channel program blueprint self-assessment. And what that does is it allows you to measure the areas of strengths and weaknesses for anybody that's either looking to build a successful sales channel or improve on what's already in place. So we do have both of those offers available to you through the offer tab. In case anybody has any lingering questions that they would like to discuss via the chat room, Marty and I are happy to facilitate a forum here for the remainder of the time that we have left. But other than that, I do want to thank everybody for their time today. I appreciate everybody making the time to join us.